Here comes a new challenger.
What's up YouTube? ChallengerTCG is back again, this time with another tier list video. Spiritforged is still a bit of a ways away, but we are going to see the first Chinese events coming up really soon, and so we wanted to give our speculative tier list. It's not pure speculation because we have been hard at work in the lab grinding. We've played hundreds of games of Spiritforged already, and we've used everything we can think of, from the new leaders to the old, and I think we have a pretty good grasp on what the format's going to be. We could still see some surprise hits coming out, but we're going to give you our honest opinion based on our testing so far. We're going to be ranking everything from S tier to Garen tier. Garen's already in Garen tier. We don't even have to talk about that guy. He's still in the same boat he was in before. But Metal Card Side Quest is basically the tier of, like, this deck is still playable. You could still go and potentially go to a regional and win a metal card with it, but you're probably not going to be making top cut. C tier is still decks that can make top cut, though they're not nearly as powerful as the decks that are above them. B tier is a solid good deck. B tier deck can definitely make top cut, could even potentially spike a tournament if you have the right matchups. Just because you're in B tier, that does not mean we're saying that deck is bad. We're actually saying that that deck is pretty good. A tier is a very good deck. These are decks that you can definitely expect to see a lot of in top cut, a lot of this at the top tables, and you can definitely win an event with this deck. And S tier is, of course, if we have it, one of the best decks in the whole format, if not the best deck. You're going to expect to see a ton of this at every top table, in every top cut. This should be taking a large meta share percentage. First up, we're going to be talking about Draven. Draven is the new Fury Chaos champion, same colors as Jinx and Annie. We think Draven is pretty insane. We're ranking him in the S tier, and I'm going to pass it over to Collin, who's actually writing our Draven guide right now, and he'll explain to you why we think Draven is S tier.
Yeah, Draven is definitely the new meta menace, is also the name of the guide that I'm going with. Moving into Spiritforged, this deck just does absolutely everything, and then some. His leader ability is absurd. Being able to draw a card for winning a combat. It's important to note that it's not on your turn, it's every single time you win a combat, and that includes just pushing your opponent's units out with cards like Fight or Flight, Rebuke, all these sort of things. There are certain times into the right matchups where Draven can draw 4 to 5 cards a turn, which is absolutely absurd. That's an entirely new opening hand that you're getting just for doing something that you were going to do anyways. Casting these Fight or Flights, casting these Rebukes, all these sort of things. And honestly, the deck is a little bit oppressive right now, even more so than in set 1 if people were upset with Kaisa shutting down a lot of decks. Unfortunately, Draven is even worse than that right now in terms of how many decks just cannot play the game because Draven exists and will be pretty popular. So Draven is definitely worthy of S tier. If you enjoy these sort of infinite value mid-range decks that just grind your opponent out, then Draven is definitely going to be the deck of choice for you, and he will be extremely powerful just due to all of the options that he has. Additionally, he is the prime abuser of what I think the best card in Spiritforged is, and maybe even the best card in the game, even though I did not rate it nearly as highly in our individual rating. Treasure Hunter is our new overlord, and you'll be seeing a lot of that card out of Draven in pretty much every deck that can play it. So yeah. What are your takes on Draven, Alex?
Yeah, I do think that Treasure Hunter is actually a big part of the reason that Draven is such a menace, because we are seeing the rise of a lot of these kind of slower decks that like kind of sit around and don't do a whole lot for the first couple turns, whether that's Irelia, whether that's Ornn. Sometimes you have like the weapon decks in the form of Yi, Fiora. You have slower control decks like Viktor. And the problem is that Treasure Hunter really gets to take advantage of these decks' lull turns and just generate all this gold, whereas a lot of these decks are trying to kind of play these Protect the King styles where they're playing a guy that might have deflect or trying to give it deflect or make it untouchable with like enough suit-ups from weapons. And the way to deal with these things is usually going to be some sort of removal spell, but because of the deflect, it costs a lot of power. But now with Gold Hunter, you kind of just bypass that deflect cost by generating all this gold in your lull time. Draven's also playing Reaver's Row as it synergizes with the leader, where when you use it, your Gold Hunter makes a gold. When they use it, you just draw a card because of Draven's ability. So I think Gold Hunter is a huge, or Treasure Hunter rather, is a very huge part of why this deck is so powerful. And I pretty much agree with everything Collin said. This is top of S tier deck in my opinion, and probably the best deck in the format. It has very few poor matchups, and even its bad matchups, it's not like a 90-10 unfavored or something. Like it still feels like it's got a real shot, like maybe 30-70 at the absolute worst. And there's not too many of those decks out there. So because of that, I'm gonna say I think Draven is our first S tier deck on this list.
Draven's definitely S tier. Just punishing your opponent for playing the game the way it's meant to be played is a pretty crazy effect.
Yeah, I agree with that, and this is something I hope that gets changed in the future in one way or another. As you'll see as we get throughout this tier list, a lot of decks are just not able to play the game solely because Draven exists.
The next few leaders here are going to be making the metal card side quest here, but we'll still go over them just to kind of give an overview of new tools that they may have gotten or why they are in the metal card side quest. Volibear is a personal favorite of mine, so I can probably talk about him. I'm probably going to put him at the top of metal card side quest, or he's definitely one of the ones at the very top. I do think Volibear is still a really strong leader. He has a really good ability. Being able to not pay power cost on mighty units is really strong. And we got a really strong mighty unit in this set in Fury in the Forerunner. This card is not only in Draven and Kaisa and pretty much every red deck probably going forward as a 2 or 3 of. I would expect to see this card all over the place, but Volibear not having to pay power for him is actually really nice. It really helps with your curve in that deck, and it's also just a nice unit to flip off of Aurora. It gives you a lot of play into Viktor that you didn't previously have, because if that unit comes off, they can't just remove it from the board. You actually get 2 more units to start contesting with, which is a really big deal in that matchup. He also got some new removal spells that aren't that great, but they're all right, and they did help him in the Annie matchup even more and in the aggressive matchups. So I do think Volibear got some good tools in this set. Almost wanted to put this guy in C tier, but I do think that he's probably going to be metal card side quest because there is people who can play the Aurora strategy a little bit better into the current field.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point as well, is that a lot of these metal card side quest leaders are not necessarily the worst thing possible, but because of the way Riftbound works, when you choose a color combination, now that we have these different leaders, you'll have multiple options available, and a lot of these leaders will just be worse than their counterpart. You know, not necessarily that they're completely unplayable, but yeah, there are just better options available.
Yeah, moving to a leader that I do think is completely unplayable, we have Jinx, the loose cannon. We're definitely throwing her into metal card side quest. Jinx got nothing in Spiritforged. We already spoke before on how Jinx had really needed more discard support. We've spoken about it many times on this channel already. She got no discard support. I think there was a single purple card in the set that actually says, you know, discard a card. She did get the other good purple things that every other purple leader got, but again, like, why would you ever play Jinx, which requires you to discard your entire hand to draw a single additional card per turn, when you can play Draven that can hypothetically draw anywhere from 4 to 6 or even 8 cards in a single turn cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see much of a reason to play it. One notable it did get was the big, I forget what the name of it is, but the big beetle card that said if you have like 1 or less card in hand, it comes and play ready, and then you draw 2 cards if it holds. I don't think that moves the needle at all for this deck. I don't even know if it would see play in this deck, to be quite honest. There's not much really to say about Jinx. There's already 2 legends that in the same color combination that are just better than her by miles. Like, there's not much else to say about this. This is just a run-of-the-mill metal card leader.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that they took one of the iconic League of Legends heroes and did her such a disservice by making her so terrible. But maybe we'll see some better support in the future for her, more discard support that hopefully will be unique to Jinx so that she can actually rise above her counterparts in Annie and Draven.
Yep, next up we've got Darius, the Hand of Noxus. Actually, looking at the tier list, I do remember Collin had mentioned yesterday that he may have wanted to move Darius into C tier, so I'm not opposed to necessarily doing that, but What do you think, Colin? Do you think we should C-tier him, or do you think he's a metal card side quest?
I think he is kind of like the biggest differentiator between him and his counterpart now being Reksai in terms of what he does. I think Darius is much stronger for the hook strategy out of this color combination that we've seen previously. Strangely enough, just because he's at least providing you that extra energy every turn in order to utilize all these things, and hook draws you enough cards that you don't need the Reksai legend ability in order to fuel you. That being said, I don't think that strategy is consistent enough for it to really make the C tier. It's just something I noted while we were looking at the Chinese results, is there have been a decent amount of Dariuses that have been able to make top cut, but these events are all very different than what we'll actually be playing here in North America. These are all best of ones rather than best of threes, so sometimes just having a strategy that's a little bit out there is going to be able to win in a best of one before your opponent truly understands what it is that you're doing. So I would say he's probably still metal card side quest, but he's at the very, very top of that. So I'd put him maybe above volley or just slightly below volley, somewhere in that range for me personally.
Next up, we've got the Nine-Tailed Fox Ahri. Definitely one of the most chase metal card side quests you can run, but again, we're going to be putting her in metal card side quest. We actually had her higher in tier list as Sett 1, but I think that even, again, now she's even more hated out. Draven is another deck that just punishes people for holding strategies, and Ahri is all about holding. That's the only way you can even trigger this Legend's ability. I know Colin was really hyped to try her out this time around. Colin, what do you think about the Nine-Tailed Fox?
Yeah, unfortunately, she kind of is in the same sort of slot that a lot of these decks are that I kind of mentioned, where she's just held prisoner to Draven right now, and that she's trying to do the fair game of holding a battlefield and just, you know, being able to accumulate points over the course of the game by holding. She got a ton of new tools that I really like the look of. Janna's an awesome card that has a lot of utility, being essentially a fight or flight on a body is super, super powerful. You know, you can combine that with cards like Sona. You have the new pump spell that gives you +2 with repeat as an option. So she was given a ton of new tools. The issue isn't that her card quality is bad, it's that the strategy that she is kind of pigeonholed into is so unbelievably unplayable while Draven exists that you just can't really do that. Additionally, I don't think her Kaisa matchup got any better. The expected metagame share being between 50 to 60% between Draven and Kaisa. If you have a bad matchup into both of those, I just can't personally put you above metal card side quests, because that's going to be more than half the games that you're going to be playing will be into one of those two decks, in my personal opinion.
Next up, we've got Lee Sin, the Blind Monk. I don't really think Lee Sin got anything this set at all. I guess maybe that one unit that readies when it puts a buff on it, but not really a lot of cards in these two colors for the buff matters decks. You did get like the monkey in the 2-drop slot, but again, there's just better leaders to be playing if you're wanting to play this color combination, namely Master Yi, because Jax has his own problems that we'll talk about a little bit later. But Alex, what do you think about Lee Sin?
Yeah, I don't see a reason to play this guy. It just like, I like his Sig spell a lot. Like, that's one thing that I do have nice to say about him, but I don't see the real upside to him right now. I don't see what he got. He seems to have gotten outclassed. Now, granted, we haven't really done any testing at all with Lee Sin, so you can take it with a grain of salt that maybe he's C tier, but I don't see him being much higher than that personally. But yeah, I don't see what he has to offer over something like Master Yi. So I think metal card side quest is pretty appropriate. I mean, he did make top cut at the last regional. Albeit he did lose immediately, but yeah, I mean, I think he just gets outclassed by a lot of the new things that Spiritforged has to offer. So metal card seems appropriate for him.
Yeah, he's definitely a prime candidate for the worse than the other leader in his color combination, right? The only benefit that he does is the buffs do allow your 2-drops to kind of swing over and such, just by getting that one extra power. But I don't think that's enough to justify his existence, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think anything playing the fair mid-range game is already just food for Draven as it is, so it's pretty tough for Lee Sin.
Exactly.
Next up, we've got Yasuo. We did get some new tools in this set. Purple got a lot of cards, as we said. Moving your treasure hunters around, making a lot of gold sounds really cool. You got the Stellacorn Herder, moving that around a bunch of times and drawing a bunch of cards seems really cool. Do think Yasuo got some good tools, but I do think he gets pretty outclassed by Irelia doing similar things, but mostly more powerful things with her chosen champion. Yasuo does have a solid chosen champion, but I don't think that he moved the needle enough to escape the metal card side quest tier. What do you think, Colin? We know you're a big fan of Yasuo.
Yeah, Yasuo is one of the decks that I get asked the most questions about when it comes to my how you play into it on Sett, especially with my Sett guide. And honestly, it's one that I have not played enough into, but when I build my decks, I build it based on the expected meta share of whatever tournaments that I'm personally going to. So when Yasuo has a 1 to 2% play rate, it's something that I probably wouldn't even think about when it comes to building my deck, because it's so unlikely that I actually end up running into one. That being said, as Anton said, Yasuo is just kind of in that awkward spot where there's another legend in his color combination that just does it better now, in my opinion. I know you said you like the chosen champion of Yasuo. I cannot stand these chosen champions that just have a 2 power cost on them, even though the ability is super strong. You're playing this 6-drop for 6 might with 2 power, and then you just die to Falling Star. Yasuo is and Ahri are kind of in that same boat for me personally, where there is a lot of these A, B, and C tier decks that they absolutely destroy. And then you look at the S tier leaders that we have on this tier list that they just stand 0% chance into, and then you're like, well, I can't really play these decks when I'm going to be playing those S tier decks. So should something happen to those 2 S tier decks and they start introducing a ban list or erratas, then I can honestly see a lot of these middle card side quest leaders really moving up in the tier list quite substantially, even just because they do so well into those mid-tier decks.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say regarding Yasuo's power cost is, at least with the treasure hunter now, he can make that 2 gold pretty easily, pull it back, and he can make a lot of gold. So the power cost might not hurt Yasuo's champ as much as it used to.
True.
Next up, we got Radiant Dawn Leona. We did not really get a ton of stun support this set around, but we did get Thwonk, which is a very powerful card. I'm sure that Leona will be able to take advantage of that card. That being said, again, this is just another fair mid-range deck that's actually trying to hold points and use stuns to push your opponent out, but your opponent has ways to negate your stuns by either bouncing your guys back to hand or pushing them out of the battlefield with things like Fight or Flight, still drawing a card off of these things and eating up whatever stun you just used. So I think Leona's in a pretty rough spot given that it's a Draven format. I don't think that she's moved out of the metal card side quest. Any thoughts on that, Colin or Alex?
Yeah, I mean, Leona's, to me, is like a prime example of the power disparity between legends in this game. Like, her effect is just so underwhelming. Like, you have to stun a card to get a buff. And granted, you can do it as many times as you want per turn, but like, how many times are you actually stunning a guy in a turn? I do not see an upside to a legend like this outside of your color combination or your chosen champ, which is a half decent chosen champ. But again, like, this legend just feels so blah to me. It's just so, how can you want to play a legend like this when there's a guy that says draw a card every time you win a combat, or bypass power costs on spells? Like, almost even any of these metal tier side quest leaders have just better legend effects than what Leona has to offer. And she's not in an incredible color combination either. So I don't see it with her. I just don't think she's very good. She has some very specific matchups that are good for her, but I think into any of the top tier decks, she's just going to get run over. I think this is a card that is pretty much going to remain eternally in the metal card side quest, because I just don't see what support they can give to a legend with an effect that's kind of this lackluster in order to make it playable.
Yeah, I mean, I do think some of the new cards that she was given, like Thwonk is an incredible card that is very, very strong. It definitely moves the needle on her for a little bit, but the issue is just, again, same as all these previous leaders. It may sound like I'm kind of repeating myself here, but I'm sure once you all end up playing with Spiritforged a lot, you'll understand where it is that we're coming from with this. But if you're going to be, trying to hold the battlefield with one of your units, your opponent sends in a thing, you thwonk it, you stun it, you get a buff, everything's all good, and then they rebuke you, they fight you, and then they draw a card now on top of removing whatever your unit was. They score their point. You're just so far behind that you just have no chance to ever catch up.
Next up, we've got Swift Scout Teemo, finally escaping the metal card side quest here. We are putting Teemo into the C tier this time around. Teemo actually got a lot of really good tools in this set. Again, we've covered that purple got so much, got an entire engine basically this set, and Teemo can definitely utilize that engine. He was already kind of doing similar things in set 1 of digging through the deck really quickly and establishing a really big Mundo, and that was a very solid strategy given that most of the meta share in set 1 was Kaisa, but this time around, again, we're dealing with Draven, and in order to hide cards, you need to hold battlefields, which means that you're going to be going to combat a lot with Draven. I do think that that's holding Teemo down a little bit, despite all of his new tricks. What do you think about Teemo, Collin? I know you liked him in set 1.
Yeah, he's a super fun leader, and some of the cool stuff you can do with him, you can still do now, even in more than previously, where you could draw your entire deck. Well, now you have Ezreals, you have called shots, you can keep cycling through your entire deck even faster to play that big Mundo. But right now, the big Mundo has become much worse than it was previously. I think he is kind of the first leader that I think has potential good meta share into everything that's not potentially named Draven, but especially if you're on Mundo or running into Mundo and they have like a switcheroo, for example, you get your 25 might Mundo swapped with their treasure hunter. That's a 1 might. That's just a 50 might swing right there off of a single card that Draven has access to. So it's really tough to be playing that strategy. That doesn't even include rebukes or fighter flights, all these sorts of things. So while Teemo has access to all these cards too, so in theory it can line up. I think that's what puts him a little bit above the rest in terms of C tier. He does still have some amount of potential because he has the exact same tricks that Draven does, but he's not drawing a card every time that he plays them, unlike Draven. So that's really where Teemo, I think, is going to fall behind in that specific matchup. And yeah, I do kind of expect Teemo to still be half decent. He's still in purple. He still gets to play all these broken cards that came from set 2. Purple was far and beyond the winner of this set. So being in that color already gives him a little bit of a leg up of everything else.
Next up, we're moving to Herald of the Arcane Viktor. Viktor has moved up quite a bit in our tier list since we last talked about him. We're actually going to speculate that Viktor is currently in the A tier. We've seen some new lists coming out of China. You may have seen the creatureless control Viktor. We have tested this outside of the best of 1 format where it was actually winning and made some tweaks, as well as it seems like China started to make similar tweaks to us, adding in things like Vanguard Armory. And I think this deck's actually a real contender. It definitely has a solid Draven matchup, which is a good place to start in this format. Alex, what do you think about Viktor Control or Viktor in general?
So big Viktor fan. Wish I could have played it more set 1. Just wasn't a believer. Our teammate Cody Williams did well with it and made top 64 at the regional, but I could not get on board. So more power to him for doing well with it. But now I'm back on the Viktor train. I like the idea of this creatureless Viktor control. I very big fan of that deck, and I've played a lot of that deck so far. And I really think this is, for some of you, it's the deck you've been waiting for. For some of you, it's the last thing you ever want to see in a card game. If you come from Magic or any other game where these creatureless control decks have existed in the past, they're absolutely a blast or a nightmare, depending on what side of the table you're on. But I think these decks do have to be respected, and the Viktor here is no exception. I think this is I'm a big fan of this deck. This is a deck I actually could see myself playing, honestly, in set 2. And it's a deck where it's in a really interesting spot because it's not one of the highest play rate decks right now. So it can be hard to justify siding specifically for it. But then if you run into it and you're not siding for it, this deck can be an absolute nightmare. I think this is one of the few decks on this list that has the privilege of being able to say it has a very favored matchup into Draven. Which is something that alone, Kaisa as well. I don't think it's quite as favored into Kaisa as Draven, but I think against even the most competent Kaisa player, it's 50-50. Against a less competent one, I'd say it's drastically favored. So I think it's one of the few decks on this list that has the privilege of being able to say that it has a good matchup into both of those decks. And because of that alone, I think it actually deserves a slot on the A tier. But I think any deck that's running a very low creature count is just going to have an absolute awful experience playing against the Viktor here. So because of that, I do think it deserves the A tier slot. I won't get into all the nuances of this deck, but I probably will do a deck profile on it at some point. But I do think this deck is just absolutely incredible, and definitely one of the higher A tier decks in my mind.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me, and is kind of what we've seen from testing. I think a lot of the success over in the Chinese metagame, as we mentioned, is because everything over there is best of 1. So as we're moving into proper best of 3 formats, I do think that there will be some sideboard tech out of at least the Draven guide that I'm writing that can potentially shut this deck down. You may end up losing game 1, but you'll have pretty solid odds in games 2 and 3, at least in my opinion. So that being said, being able to win a game 1, the Draven deck will still have to see its sideboard cards in both games 2 and 3 in order to actually be able to stand a chance in the matchup. So Viktor is in a very good spot for that, and is, as Alex mentioned, a solid contender. I think he's kind of the antithesis of what we're having to see in order to adapt to the metagame of Draven. You know, coming from League, the League of Draven is what we're experiencing right now. And if you kill all of Draven's units outside of combat, then he never gets to draw cards, he never gets his engine online, and you're just kind of forced to play that game if you want to be on an even footing with Draven. Solid A tier if you like playing those blue-white control strategies of Magic's past, then congratulations, there's a blue-white control strategy, and your win condition starts in play, which is kind of the biggest differentiator from the other cards in this color combination as to why Viktor is so strong.
Next up, we've got Misfortune Bounty Hunter. We're actually speculating that Misfortune is probably going to be closer to the bottom of A tier. She was still a solid contender last set, of course. We saw her have some pretty good success at the Houston Regional, taking a fair amount of top cut slots. We also had Ali Eldrazi winning the Orlando 10K event with his Misfortune. Think that the deck is still actually really strong. You got Called Shot, which added to your consistency, and some other tools that make your matchups into, say, Viktor a lot more tolerable. I think Misfortune is actually a pretty decent contender into Draven. Of course, Aurora was always solid into Kaisa, so you have a pretty solid matchup there as well. And yeah, I'm just overall still pretty impressed with this deck as far as an Aurora contender. I do think that the death of Aurora has been greatly exaggerated. I do think that, yes, you can definitely hate the deck out more, but I don't think that it's going to be taking up such a significant meta share that it makes sense to be hating out that deck more when there's so many other things you need to hate out, like this creatureless Viktor and Draven itself and all these other decks. And even the answers that you have to Aurora, Misfortune always has the out of having sabotages plus mind splitters to actually take your answers. So even if you are boarding in answers to the strategy, they have the most chances of answering your answers, which I think is what pushes it above the rest of the Aurora decks. And I think it's probably the only Aurora deck that we're going to see in high table contention, but I would be surprised to not see Misfortune make some mark in the format. Even if it does, maybe it gets hated out and then falls off, but I would expect to still see it around the top tables. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that all makes sense to me, and is kind of my take on it as well. I do not expect Yi Aurora to be nearly as playable, just for the reason that it's a lot easier for them to blow up Yi's Aurora than it is MF's. MF can still flip that Mind Splitter off the top, and whatever your sideboard card is that you boarded in is completely gone. That was supposed to answer Aurora, and now what do you do, right? So I think the deck is still very, very strong, is something we'll see at least a little bit of for the people that enjoy it. It does have some really tough matchups. You know, when you're playing 8 units, the Viktor control deck with 39 removal spells can be kind of tough. So yeah, we'll see as time goes on if it will hold up, but Aurora is still alive and well, and as previously mentioned, it's one of the decks that doesn't do combat at all until it gets to the point where you can't do combat because I've ripped your entire hand apart and have 30 to 40 might worth of units, which is enough to stop Draven. So just kind of the shift that we're seeing in the Draven metagame towards these decks that just don't actually play the game the way that was intended with having combat, as unfortunate as. So yeah, the MF deck is definitely solid for the people that enjoyed it in set 1.
Yep, and I agree with pretty much all of that. I will say if Sabotage is back on the rise, then I think that's kind of where this deck gets pacified a bit. But right now, we're not seeing a lot of the orange decks, so we're not seeing nearly as many Sabotages to kind of hate this deck out right now.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Collin said a little bit too, a big reason that Master Yi Aurora was so strong, especially last format, is because he was getting even more value out of his holding ability, whereas with the current strategy of playing Aurora into Draven, especially, like, your whole strategy is just to hold all your units in the back and stack up a large amount of units to finally contest at the end game, and that was kind of Misfortune's strategy in set 1 as well. The problem with doing that in Master Yi is, of course, then you're not getting any value out of your Yi, and you're basically just playing a blank leader. Like, at that point, you might as well just be playing Aurora out of, say, Lee Sin, and at least be buffing your backline or doing something proactive. Yi doesn't really get any of his advantages when you can't be holding with your units. So
yeah, the MF deck almost plays more like a prison deck, whereas I kind of considered Yi Aurora to be like this mid to late game strategy deck that just had this inevitable win condition with Aurora, right? So even though they are very similar decks, they kind of had a different playstyle like that.
Next up is Sett the Boss. We did put Sett into B tier at the end of set 1. We still think he is actually in B tier right now. I think Sett's ability is still really strong, and he did get a lot of good tools in this set. But we're going to pass it over to our Sett expert, Collin, of course, and he can explain to you why we believe Sett is in B tier.
Yeah, Sett actually does have still a pretty strong matchup spread into the majority of these lists, these leaders that you'll see in the A to C tier, and even some of the S tier leaders, giving a little bit of a spoiler there. However, Draven is a real problem for a deck, as you can imagine, that is built entirely around these big units that are trying to hold, and they're just prime rebuke targets. Unfortunately, you're trying to do fair combat with Sett and have your units just survive with the Sett leader ability, and you can't really do that into Draven as well. I do think the matchup is somewhat playable, but it does not feel good because a lot of it ends up becoming like the antithesis of a guessing game, where Draven has so many things that you have to play around, and sometimes it's playing around their equipment and getting to a certain might number, sometimes it's trying to play around fight or flight, sometimes it's trying to play around rebukes, sometimes it's playing around switcheroo, and unless you see the sabotage on that key turn, then you're just going to have to take a wild shot in the dark and hope that you guess correctly, and if you guess wrong, then the game's over immediately. So it does not feel particularly good going into Draven being so reliant on sabotage. That being said, he's incredibly good into the decks that we put at A tier, being MF and Viktor, being the best of the orange decks that are available in set 2, in my personal opinion at least. So being able to main deck 3 sabotages for MF, and to Viktor, if they're just trying to kill all your stuff, you get to save them. So you just have infinite value. He got a bunch of cool tools with the Fade Dragon is one of my favorite cards that they've printed but it's impossible to play a 7-drop right now with so many rebukes going around. So we've tested it a little bit with the camel as well as a card that people were initially hyped for, but it's very difficult to play a card like that where if you aren't immediately playing it on curve, then it's just a dead card in your deck. So it's not something I've completely given up on yet into the Draven matchup, and maybe I can get that figured out. If I can, then Sett does have a pretty good meta share, but until then, he's kind of just the best of the fair decks, in my opinion, that are actually still trying to do combat.
Next up, we've got Annie Darkchild. Annie was a menace, obviously, in Set 1. Did much better in the Western format than it did in China. Ended up winning our first regional event, the only Set 1 regional that we had. Beating, of course, our team, playing Master Yi Aurora. And we still think Annie is going to be in A tier. There was contention for her being considered S tier in Set 1. I do think that Draven kind of outclasses her in her color pair, though Annie does still do things better than Draven, like for instance the Viliwind combo, which is something that Kaisa still cannot really interact with. I think Annie still has a lot of potential in this set. What do you think, Alex?
So I'm going to start this off with, I was the only one who actually thought Annie should maybe be at the top of B tier, not A tier. And the reason for this is, I mean, we do rate these kind of in a vacuum, and in a vacuum, she probably is A tier, but I just think she's extremely outclassed by Draven right now. There's very few things she does better than what Draven does. One of the things Anton mentioned was the By the Wind, which Kaisa still has no way to stop, but Draven could just play that if it wanted to. If it really wanted to, it could main it. It doesn't really fit the flow of its main board, but it could easily still be maining rides and then siding Vi's if it needs to. So like that kind of advantage is like sort of lost. It's not something that's exclusive to Annie. You do have the legend ability, which makes it easier to leave mana up for your opponent's turn. But if you've played a lot of Draven, I've played probably the most Draven of anyone on our team. Maybe Colin's probably pretty close, but I played a lot of Draven. And something you'll notice about this deck and the way, especially the way we have it built, is that you don't actually develop a whole, like, you don't tap out most of the turns. Like, you actually don't have that many creatures to develop, which is why it kind of matches up a little poorly into the Viktor control decks, because you don't have this endless spam of creatures kind of like Kaisa does. You only have so many in the deck, but a lot of the times you just still have the 2-up anyways. You're not forcing yourself to tap out. You don't even, a lot of the times, have enough creatures to play in your hand to actually tap out a lot of the time. So I think the Annie legend ability is kind of unnecessary now. And for me, that's the reason I wanted to put her in B tier. But in terms of pure power, she is still just like Draven's slightly worse off cousin. I think that she does get to ride. She gets to main By the Wind combo, which is a nice upside. But for the most part, I'm Team Draven here, and I think Annie's a little worse for wear, specifically because of Draven's predicted dominance in the meta. So I don't have a whole lot more to add on to what she does better from last set. Purple was kind of the winner of this set, kind of like Collin said, but I don't think that I think Annie's kind of doing the same thing, and I don't feel there's a whole lot of reason to play her over Draven right now. But in terms of power level, she is still just incredible. Like, she's good at what she does, just worse than Draven in my opinion.
Yeah, I kind of take the opposite approach with Annie, where honestly I do think she has, at least in theory, a decent matchup into the rest of the top tiers. But she is really bad into Draven, unfortunately. You can never buy the wind into Draven when they're just holding fight or flights, rebukes, switcheroos, all these different interaction cards that will completely shut down your By the Wind combo, which means that you just have to naturally score to 8 out of Annie, which can be a little bit difficult. So I think that's the only thing that's kind of really holding her back right now. She's obviously going to be better into the MF Aurora that we mentioned, being much more aggressive. And to Viktor, it's kind of a coin toss for me as to which is better. Draven really never gets to draw cards, so I feel like the extra energy and the fact that Annie can play into play into this strategy by always having 2 up for the new counterspell and Hard Bargain really helps in the Viktor matchup. So I feel like Annie's a little bit more powerful there. Obviously, historically in set 1, she's done particularly well into Kaisa, or at least is decent to a coin toss. So I do think her matchup spread warrants her being in A tier, with the exception of Draven being very, very difficult, as they're just kind of a bigger unit deck that can be kind of hard for you to break into. And if you're trying to abuse your flashes to save your units, then they're drawing cards every time that you're playing these flashes. It can be tough, but you are playing a very different strategy. You're so much more aggressive out of the Annie deck. You're playing the sneaky deck hands, playing more 2s, you're accelerating your Kaisas more, all that sort of stuff, and you're able to tap out because you have the Annie Legend ability. So I still like Annie. I think she is valid to be in the A tier, and the people that enjoyed that deck in set 1 can still play her in set 2 and have a reason to do so.
Next up, we got the Wuju Bladesman Master Yi. As we mentioned, don't think Yi Aurora is quite where it was last set. It's kind of probably fallen off in my opinion, and that's coming from someone who really enjoyed that deck. I did try to make it work a little bit, but it was just really, really tough into Draven, and just tough into a format where there's a lot more rebukes and a lot more gold going on. So like your deflects are not as impactful on your dead blooms, and your big things are just getting rebuked all day. So, and drawing cards when they do it. It just feels like it's kind of tough for Aurora. I do think that mid-range still has some viability when it comes to Yi, and that's still going to give you like a solid Annie matchup. But again, you have to hold, and that means that Draven is going to farm you for cards, and that's why we put Yi in the B tier this time around. Alex, what do you think about Master Yi this set?
Going back to what we've been talking about again, like, I hate to say it, but Draven, it's Draven time, baby. This is kind of a hold deck. It's not kind of, it is just a hold deck. And a lot of the new strategies revolve around beefing your guys up with equips, which I think is of everything that a Yi mid-range deck could have ever wanted. Just a way to make your guy bigger and then give him some additional effects, like scoring an extra point. Like maybe if you want, you can put the deflect weapon on. Just like a lot of things going there. These weapon master guys really kind of synergize well. The camel synergizes super well with what Yi wants. So it got all these great tools, but the problem is Draven yearns for combat. All he wants to do is attack these whole decks and just dump every spell he can into one guy. Like, that's really all he needs is like 2, maybe 3 creatures on the board, and he just wants to dump his whole hand into making your life miserable, into either trying to win the fight against your guy, trying to invalidate your combat. So the slower Yi decks, he really profits from, where like you might spend the first turn or 2 trying to set up weapons. He gets to just go in and kind of score some free points. So he gets to get this lead and make his push spells more effective. And then the Treasure Hunter, like we mentioned, is just going to get all this power to make your deflects ineffective. The other thing, too, is I think the best way to beat Draven is the Camel, actually. He's one of the few things, suiting up the Camel is one of the few things that Draven can really struggle with. But again, when you're taking the time to try to set this Camel up, Draven's just stacking all these massive guys in the back. You've got Draven Chosen Champ, you've got Darius Trifarian, and then you've got the Blood Rushes, the Cleaves, all these pumps that they can kind of just accumulate in their back row. You've got the I forget the name of the Worm Coil engine, but you've got the Worm Coil engine. You've got all these guys that just stack up in the back, and because they score these early game points, all they have to do is win 1 or 2 fights at the end, and they've won the game. So now they're like, sure, suit up your Camel all you want. He's an 11. Well, here comes my Darius. Here comes my Draven. Here comes my mech. All these guys are coming at you, and they're also backed up by potential pumps in hand. But then when you don't have the Camel, it's even worse, right? Because now you're a whole deck that's trying to fight against all these push spells, and your defense does not line up as well. Like, you have to spend mana on your turn to try to play these equips. You have to spend power to put these equips on. You have to develop new guys if you lose guys. So you're not able to hold all your defense up. Meanwhile, the Draven just gets to attack with everything. It can hold everything up, and as long as they have 2 guys, they can just mag dump their whole hand into making sure they win this combat. We did play a good amount of this matchup, and I think that was one of the biggest problems. That being said, the other side of the coin is I think this deck is incredible versus Kaisa now. I think you can make this deck to absolutely just slaughter Kaisa. It has so many good pumps now. You've got Punch First, so they can't really ever break through. You've got the Camel. You've got all these weapons that accelerate your win con, like the Triforce, for example. You can make this deck absolutely demolish Kaisa. And that alone, I think, holds it into the B tier. Not to mention, I do think it has some half-decent matchups along the list. Like, against Viktor, I still think it's fine because you do have a lot of deflect guys. You've got some new deflect guys, too. You've got the Camel. I think it's got to actually... It's still a Yi deck, so it's still very good into a lot of the meta. I just think that Draven is just an absolute nightmare. Like, many of the decks on this list have the same problem. Draven is just a nightmare for this guy. And I also think that the way that this deck is formatted right now does not line up as well into some of the current existing decks. So I think they're just, as much as this deck improved into Kaisa, I think it lost into some of these more protect the king style strategies. I think it doesn't want to play against these types of Irelias, these types of Ornns, just these like big boggle decks it struggles with. So for that, I think B tier is appropriate.
Yeah, that mostly about covers it. I started with a Yi mid-range list that capped out at 4 even. Even the only 4 that was in it was the new guy that just has deflect as a vanilla, and that deck was demolishing Kaisa going first or second. There was just nothing they could do. You just punch first, you'd play your buffs, and you could really shut that down deck if you wanted. But then you just got ran over by Draven, and it was absolutely terrible trying to hold with that deck. Even in the games where you do have Camel and building it more towards that, you have to see it on curve, otherwise the card's just way too slow. So you have to be playing it on turn 3 every time, or turn 2 with a Find Your Center, which is only going to happen 55 to 60% of games. That'll be in your opening hand because Yi does not draw cards. And the games that you don't see it are just functionally unwinnable. So yeah, I think that about summarizes Yi in a nutshell and from our specific testing.
Next up, we got Lux, Lady of Luminosity. Collin was the one a little bit earlier mentioning maybe we should put her in C tier. We did ultimately decide to throw her into the Metal Card side quest. She's in the same color pair as Viktor, and that means that she's capable of doing the control style shenanigans as well as drawing cards, but she does not really have a way to score points like Viktor does, thanks to his token ability, which was what Collin was talking about earlier when mentioning that the way that your win condition in Viktor is actually printed on your legend, so you get to start with it right from the jump. Lux has to assemble a win condition, and she can play all the same cards as Viktor, but Viktor just kind of does this better, which is why we believe Lux is ultimately in the Metal Card side quest. Did you want to add anything to that, Collin?
Yeah, it's more just to say that I don't actually think this deck is that bad. Realistically, it's somewhere in the C to B tier range for me, just because you can use Vanguard Armory as your win condition, which then just, becomes a better Viktor hero power once you get to that point. But Viktor is still better in a vacuum because you can win the game so much quicker. You can put your opponent on a clock from immediately turn 1, you're never missing a unit, and you're going to be able to do that every single turn, whereas Lux just kind of has to sit around until she actually sees her Vanguard Armory, take her turn off to establish it, hope that it doesn't get blown up, because if it does, then it's going to slow you down that much more, and that puts her a little bit worse than Viktor. But honestly, this deck isn't bad. It's just, unless you're specifically going for the metal card, you're better off just playing Viktor, and so that's why she goes into this tier, despite not actually being that bad of a deck. So if you just really like Lux, then you can definitely give her a shot this set.
Next up, we've got Mechanized Menace. This is Rumble. We're going to be putting Rumble into the Metal Card side quest tier, though if you were to try to convince me that this is a C tier leader, I may not fully disagree with you. The color pair is insane. Like, Kaisa's color pair is absolutely bonkers. There are really good removal spells and synergies in those two colors. The problem is that, again, just kind of talking about Lux compared to Viktor, Rumble's kind of in the same boat of why would you play Rumble when you could play Kaisa. Rumble's numbers actually do get pretty big. Like I have been testing with this deck a little bit into some of the format, and he actually has some pretty cool breakpoints that actually would be really good if we were in a combat format. But because of Draven, we're actually not in a combat incentivized format, and so an extra +1 doesn't really move the needle when Draven's just drawing cards every time that it smashes into you and can actually go over you. And a lot of these other decks that are combat incentivized, they're already disincentivized to play the game right now because Draven is going to be so popular. So you're not really getting to get your advantages in the matchups where your hero power is designed for, and so you're not really doing much in the format in general. Though again, I do think that the color combo is good. The mech synergies and the mech tribal cards were really good. I do think that there could be a little bit deeper of a card pool there, but they actually are pretty good cards overall. But again, even then, we're seeing a lot of people playing mechs out of Kaisa. Why would you play mechs out of Rumble when you could play mechs out of Kaisa and still have very cheap broken spells like Singularity or Falling Star, of course? Yeah, I don't know if you guys had anything to add on Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, I know I tested it with you a little bit from the Draven side, and honestly, the deck did seem pretty cool with a lot of what it was doing, and I could see a world where if they handle Draven the right way and Riot gets rid of him for us so that we can have all these kind of interesting decks that are down here in the middle card side quest tier get bumped up. I could see Rumble being a good contender. He gets some very interesting breakpoints. I honestly feel like he does play quite a bit different from Kaisa, just in the fact that he's able to have this like hold strategy. You know, his forerunners are going to be 7s on defense that spit out 2 4s now, and that's not even including once you get the blue Rumble leader out there. Now they're like 8s and 5s. He gets to some crazy numbers and all this stuff. One of the things that you were doing into other decks that seemed really, really strong was the fact that he is able to continually recycle his first mate and bubble bot so that you can send something in, you play the bubble bot out of your hand, then next time you conquer with your red Rumble, then you can recycle your bot to play another bot from grave, retreat it out of the base, or retreat it back to base from a battlefield, and never leave your units available to be killed in combat. So there's a bunch of cool stuff that I really, really liked out of that Rumble deck, but he's 0% into winning the Draven matchup, so he unfortunately is not very good right now.
Next up, we've got Lucian. We did post a deck list that we talked about on our Twitter recently, a combo Lucian deck. We actually do think that this deck has some legs, and we're actually going to be putting Lucian at the bottom of B tier this time around. Even though this is a combat focused deck, Lucian actually can just take points without having to stay there, which is really nice in the Draven. Not offering them any card draws is really huge with his chosen champ. Collin, I know you've been playing a good amount of this. Alex has played some of it as well. So did you have any thoughts on this, Collin, as far as Lucian goes?
Yeah, I personally really like the combo Lucian list. I've looked at quite a few Lucian lists, and I'm honestly surprised that nobody was playing the combo. When I saw the Spear and the Triforce, I was like, oh, which deck is able to play this? Lucian, which is already kind of a weapon-based deck anyways. All right, seems like a perfect fit. I will say that Lucian does kind of fall behind whenever he doesn't see the combo, but honestly, into most matchups, you can win the game every time that you see the combo just because it is so powerful to be able to score 2 points a turn, and notably, it also scores you the winning point, being that if you ever run into like a MF or Aurora, for example, or any of these Boggles decks that we've mentioned, being one large unit, hold a battlefield, and then traditionally decks can score the other battlefield for pretty much free, but unless you're able to hold a battlefield, which they always get ganking, so you can't hold it, or you score both, where they'll have this 30 or 40 might that's on one battlefield, you can't actually win that. Lucian is able to get around that because of the Triforce win, circumnavigates that issue and will let you win immediately by just scoring one side. So you're basically guaranteed to win into all these decks like enough Aurora and such when you do see the combo. The issue really is just the inconsistency. You aren't like Kaisa or Draven or these other decks that are just drawing half their deck every single game. So if your deck is organized in such a way that you don't see the combo, or you see all your Triforces and then your Spears, or all your Spears and then your Triforces, then it's kind of rough. And the other Lucian versions that don't play the combo are much, much worse, just because they're decks that are already trying to hate out Draven by playing all the removal spells. So if you're playing a deck that's just all equipment and a couple of units that you're trying to build, well, there are other decks that are doing that strategy better. So you're just going to incidentally get hated out by the decks that are trying to beat Draven. But that at least was my take with it. I like the deck. It's pretty cool. And if you want that strategy, he is certainly playable. But I'm curious what your take was on the deck, Alex.
My biggest issue is you're playing a color combination kind of similar to Sett's, where you don't have a lot of draw, you brick a lot, but now you've put a lot of air in your deck. And what I mean by that is just like equipped. So like when you're playing against decks like the Viktor deck, your objective obviously is to see combo and just kill them really fast, which great, you do that, it's probably fairly simple. But like, because your deck is full of so much air, the moment you even start treading water just a little bit against a deck like Viktor, it's over for you. Your deck is just air. You cannot produce enough units. You're kind of just sitting there against this deck that's holding all these instant speed interactions that's just going to eliminate every single unit you play for the rest of the game. And then even when you're in top deck mode against, it can be any deck on this list. When you start entering the top deck mode, now your deck is just filled with chaff units, all these equips that don't really do anything. You are kind of just a very early aggressive deck. But the moment I felt that you ran out of steam, the game just kind of ended. Like, there wasn't any comeback mechanic. You are very committed. There's no lightning bolts to top deck or burn spells to top deck to just kill your opponent most of the time. Sometimes you can like sit there and try to assemble combo for a few turns and just like break through, where you have like maybe 3 equips on the board, you have the Relentless Pursuit, and you're just like, okay, I need one decent sized creature, and I can actually try to just assemble the combo and kill them. But outside of that, you don't have much get back. And that was kind of my biggest issue with this deck. All that being said, this is probably one of the best like true aggressive decks in the format. I do like Lucian. I do think he's decent. I don't see him as like a top 5 deck right now, but I do think this is a guy that you can reasonably make top cut with.
Next up, we've got Daughter of the Void Kaisa. Kaisa is another card that I feel like its demise has been greatly exaggerated. Kaisa's going nowhere in our opinion, and Kaisa is still going to be in S tier. We are putting it just under Draven, but I mean, these two are neck and neck. Kaisa's still very, very powerful. Still one of the best decks in the game by far. Didn't get a ton of new tools, though it did get some, but it didn't really need them. The blue Poro is probably more than enough for Kaisa, in all honesty. Just gold in Kaisa is already crazy, because Kaisa basically gives you a gold every turn. What do you guys think about Kaisa? We'll start with Collin.
Yeah, she's still definitely here to stay, and the people who are doubting on Kaisa are just either not testing with the deck or engagement farming or baiting in some way. For better or worse, she's here to stay as one of the few decks that does have the ability to contend with Draven. It does feel like if you build your deck properly, Kaisa has access to all the tools that Draven hates to see, being a Cathian Reign, singularities, all these sorts of things that can just wipe Draven's units off the board before they ever get into combat, which is what he is really afraid of. So that is why Kaisa is kind of up here at the top for me, is that she actually has a solid matchup into what is the best deck in the format. So for that reason, she has to be S tier, and she's a little bit better into decks such as Viktor, in my opinion, just because she does play a few more units, and she has the surprise win condition of Time Warp out of nowhere, still being an absolutely ridiculous card that should not exist, but it does, unfortunately. So she can just kind of steal a game completely out of nowhere out of Viktor and actually have that solid win condition. The one issue in quotation marks that I've seen with the Draven deck is it doesn't have like a super powerful win condition outside of just a mass number of spells and like pushes and rebukes and cleaves and just kind of throwing all these cards that you accumulated over the course of the game. Kaisa does in both Thousand Tail Watcher and Time Warp, so because they're so individually powerful out of one card, Kaisa can win even against these resource denial decks, whereas Draven kind of struggles a little bit into those strategies when he's not being able to use his ability because he relies on that mass number of cards. So Kaisa is definitely here to stay. If you enjoyed Kaisa in set 1, you'll enjoy her in set 2. The list hasn't changed too much, but there definitely are a couple of new tools that she's throwing into her deck. So you'll definitely be able to continue winning with her, for better or worse.
Yep, and I pretty much agree with all of that. It doesn't take a whole lot more. Like, the needle couldn't really move much for this deck. I don't know how much better you could possibly have made it. But it's still one of the best deck. It still positions very well into a lot of the current decks. I do think there are a few more decks that can kind of annoy her a little bit more now, but I don't think that changed what she's doing as a whole and how powerful she actually is. So I think S tier is quite appropriate for this.
Yeah, just to add on to what Collin said just slightly, the Time Warp is even easier to get to now because of cards like the Blue Poro. Getting an extra power makes such a big deal in getting to 10 energy now, and so if you even get like 1 gold in the game, odds are you're not even probably going to have to cast that many retreats to be able to get to Time Warp mana now. You could just kind of get there, because that was really one of the struggles with Kaisa, was like you would always be floating around this 8 and 9 point, and gold has moved the needle just enough that like Time Warp is very, very relevant now. Like, you're going to be able to cast this card, or threaten to cast this card, almost every game on average, more so than you were in set 1. Next up, we've got Reksai. I know that this has been a personal favorite of Alex's. We're actually putting Reksai in the C tier, even considered putting it into the B tier, but we do think it has a few tough matchups in the higher tiers here. I do think that the deck's really solid, doing something different than Darius, and actually does draw cards, or produces additional resources, which was something that Darius was struggling with. Alex, you've definitely played the most Reksai. What are your thoughts?
I think this is like the bottom of B tier, realistically. But I do recognize the shortcomings. The biggest one is this deck just gets pounded by Kaisa, more specifically Falling Star. A lot of the units that you're playing in this deck just dies to Falling Star, which is it might as well be a coined term here at Challenger TCG at this point. It really, really struggles into Kaisa, especially when Kaisa goes first. All that being said, the reason I do think this is kind of bottom of B tier, this deck can absolutely beat Draven. Just with its onslaught of guys, it actually can just keep pushing through and attacking Draven. It does play Falling Star itself, so it does have that good removal. It actually cares a little bit less about Draven's push type effects when it's attacking, because it is actually just a swarm deck. It can actually just overwhelm them with a mass number of creatures. But I think one of the biggest things about Reksai is it is a little bit of a high roll deck. You're going to get some hits off the top that are just going to win you the game off the spot. With your Underdweller, sometimes you're just making this extra energy that you need to cast extra guys that lets you swarm faster. I think that's where kind of like Reksai's held back, is like when things are going well and you're hitting off the top like you're supposed to, this deck is cooking. Like, this deck could easily be an A tier when you're actually when you're actually hitting the things, when you're generating all this extra mana, when you're hitting the removal when you need it, when you're hitting the specific creatures when you need them. It's just a very fast, aggressive swarm deck. But when things aren't going well, this deck is exactly where it belongs, in C tier. I will say, if you are annoyed with Viktor, you're going to locals, everybody's playing the Viktor control deck. You're sick and tired of the one guy at your locals who's cocky now because he wins with Viktor every week. Well, let me tell you, Reksai got a surprise for him. This deck slaughters Viktor. There's just no way to stop. Once you make the first capture, you just play something off the top, play something off the top. They cannot possibly outvalue the amount of creatures that you are going to put into play with this legend. Just absolutely incredible. You have a bunch of accelerates. Your chosen champion can make your guys off the top accelerate. Just like, you don't even need the high roll potential as long as your deck is operating at a very basic consistency level. They're never like this is like the closest thing that Reksai has to like a 100% win rate. So that is one place that I think it is very good. That being said, it's still like, it definitely can struggle into some of the whole decks because sometimes its breaking power is not always great. It does do a very good job of accumulating the back line, which is part of how it beats Draven, is it just attacks every turn, tries to score a point while building up the back line. Draven doesn't actually defend very well. Like, it does have all these pushes and things it wants. But against big creatures, its creatures aren't actually that large on defense, and they don't really stack up the battlefields. They're not a whole deck. So, like, a lot of times you can kind of just go, I'll attack with a guy. Would you like to push it? Okay, I'll attack with another guy. Like, you have a lot of similar, the big creatures. You have the Forerunner, you have the Darius, like, and then you just have these guys building up in the back row. So if you need to play the Underdweller, the Undertitan, or whatever to buff your whole board, you can. You can play the what's the board buffer? Grand Stratagem. You can play the Grand Stratagem. Yeah, you can play the Grand Stratagem to buff your board. But again, like, this deck is the epitome of Dies to Falling Star. Like, my God, like, because like, even going second, your chosen champion is a 3. If you, like, when you capture that first battlefield, you can really start popping off. But the problem is just that sometimes you can't capture the first battlefield. Another huge issue for this deck is Hextech Ray. Hextech Ray, just like, you attack with your chosen champ, they just Hextech Ray it. That doesn't feel very good. So, just like, there's a lot of shortcomings. It is a high roll deck in nature. I haven't perfected it, but I think this deck could be B tier with a little more work. I have to put a little bit more time into it, I think.
Next up, we'll cover Fire Below the Mountain, Ornn. We think Ornn is actually in the B tier. We haven't seen a lot of performance yet coming out of China, but we have been testing a lot of Ornn internally and trying to get this guy to work. Big fan of his hero power, his legend ability, and just the way that he works, just assembling, as we kind of mentioned the Boggle strategy a few times before. This is just putting together the ultimate unit, you know, summoning a massive, hard to remove unit with lots of might, strapping it full of equipment. That's what Ornn strategy is, and it is pretty powerful into certain archetypes in the format. Collin, you've definitely put the most time into Ornn. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, honestly, he feels kind of like the New Age Aurora strategy to me personally, and he's kind of just built around getting this to this inevitability point where you can get to this 30 to 40 might Ornn and just completely lock your opponent out of the game by giving him ganking and just going from one battlefield to the next. He is able to play a bunch of counter spells because he's in green, and you can kind of create this lock situation where your opponent just can't do anything because you've got all these counter spells. It doesn't matter how many fighter flights or rebukes they have. If they're spending 4 to 6 power every time that they can play them, they can only ever usually play, you know, at most 2, and then they're not going to be able to cast another spell for a very long time. So I liked this strategy. It does have a few shortcomings, namely the fact that Thermo Beam exists, and that card is really, really holding you back. So it is one of those decks that looks really, really good if all you do is test game 1s. It'll have a very, very good matchup spread into pretty much everything but Viktor. And then you start testing into game 2s and 3s where your opponent brings in Thermo Beams. Honestly, the deck is very reliant on Spellsonger, so if they can even just blow up that, then your deck really isn't going to be able to keep up. You know, that's how you get your deflect 4s, your deflect 6s, because of that card. And when you don't, either you don't see it or it gets blown up, then your game is pretty much as good as over. So I do think it is a playable deck if you can dodge those, very similar to like Affinity out of Magic, where, you know, you just dodge the Stony Silences and then you're good, right? If they never see the Thermo Beam, they never see the Gear Hate, then your deck will absolutely cook things. But when they do, you're gonna be a sad man. So
Next up, we've got Grandmaster at Arms Jax. Jax was a deck I was definitely trying to play a lot because I was a big fan of the champion in League of Legends. Unfortunately, like Lucian, Jax is just not really doing as much as Master Yi is in this format. And the biggest issue is, again, Jax is a hold deck. Like, even his signature spell is specifically something that really benefits holding. I mean, you can use it offensively if you just don't want to lose your unit, but that's not typically what you want to be doing with your signature spell. You want to be living the dream of stacking up Triforces on something at a battlefield and then making it take no damage, stunning out all your opponent's assaults, and just scoring a bunch of points with Triforce. It just doesn't end up working out that way for Jax. Again, Draven just kind of is a big part of that. I do think Jax uses equipment better than Yi, but Yi's +2 is still really relevant. Honestly, I think Jax could be playable if Yi was playable for basically the same reasons, but again, I just don't know why I would be playing Jax over Yi right now. The equipments in these colors are also just kind of just a little lackluster. I wish we had, of course, Guardian Angel and Triforce are both two insane equipments, but outside of those two, I just don't feel like we have enough really solid equipments. Not stuff that really benefits holding. That's what I would have wanted to see more out of green and orange equipments. I would have wanted to see more equipments that benefit holding strategies. GA, I guess you could kind of argue, does that a little bit, but just not really. I mean, you want things that give you either bigger defensive buffs or things that shield you or something like that. Next up, we got Legend of the Sands, Azir. We actually did put Azir into the C tier. I think Azir's a really solid token deck. Basically turning all of your gears into bodies is really nice. Living weapon, for those of you who are familiar with Magic, like turning all of your weapons into free guys, or one energy for 2 might, which is a great rate on a guy. And then those guys get to pick up the weapons right away because they have Weapon Master. Really powerful synergy. His Sig spell's really good. His chosen champions are pretty solid as well. Just think that the strategy is a little weak to some of the higher up decks. And again, like Alex kind of mentioned, the Leona color combo is just a little awkward, though there are some good cards in both of those colors that synergize fairly well. What do you think about this deck, Alex?
So I was a big fan of Viktor. For the same reason, I'm a big fan of Azir, and I think I've seen Cody's played this deck a lot actually, and he's beat my ass like a drum a couple times with this deck. I think it's very good. Even in the Kaisa, it was actually kind of impressive. A lot of these, it has the most weapons you could ever ask for. It has good weapons too for what it's trying to do, and I think too this deck just makes so many bodies. It's just so good at repopulating the board consistently. I'm a big fan of the Azir deck. I think one of the things, it's unfortunate because if you like these style of decks, I think this was kind of in the same vein as Viktor, but now Viktor's kind of turned into this just strict control deck, and Azir now is assuming more of the role of what Viktor was last set. So if you liked Viktor last set and you don't like the creatureless version, I think this is going to be the new deck for you. I think this deck has a lot of game. Even in a Draven, it was actually pretty impressive what it could do. The Sig spell is just so powerful. I do think the deck has a few shortcomings. The biggest one being the Thermo Beam, of course, where if you do have a way to kind of wipe out, maybe wipe out some of these tokens, or even if you don't have a way to wipe them out, they get kind of useless once they lose their equip. So if you Thermo Beam them and they just lose everything, it's kind of over for them. And they only have one way to actually stop it, which is Wind Wall, which I think is at times going to be pretty difficult for a deck that probably wants to spend some amount of power. Even though the tokens have Weapon Mastery, you do have to sometimes move your weapons around and re-equip them. This deck, does have a little bit of a shortcoming to, I hate to say it, dies to Falling Star, yada, 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 many such cases. But I do think multiple Falling Stars can be a bit of a nightmare for this deck because a lot of these weapons don't actually give a lot of durability. They do in certain places, like the Brutalizer is only giving durability the turn it's attached. The Shield's only giving durability when it blocks. So these tokens are still all falling below 3, and that is part of the issue. Same thing with the Cathian Rain. So I think because of these shortcomings, I think red is the biggest one. Just the color red in general, it kind of holds back Azir as a deck, but I still think it's a very good one. I think this could be in B tier. I honestly think this is kind of in B tier, and I think this is a deck that we have not seen the best iteration of yet. I think this is a deck that will continue to improve, and someone will crack it to the point where it gets in B tier consistently, maybe even A tier. I think a lot of decks on this list, there's not a lot of iteration that can be done, but I think with Azir, this is one of the decks that could drastically improve.
Yeah, I mean, it is a decent color combination, and it does have a lot of options for powerful cards. But to me, it feels like it's kind of in the same boat as Ornn, where if people are playing Thermo Beam, which I don't expect it to be a card that people continue to play, just being that these cards are in the lower tiers and lower play rates. You kind of got to tech for all that stuff at the top. You only get 8 sideboard slots, so making room for a card that's so narrow and so niche is going to be tough. But even when they don't, like you're just making a bunch of tokens that can easily be handled, and you're kind of slow. So out of things like Kaisa, if you're trying to hold, you're doing it with a bunch of tokens. So a Thousand Tailed Watcher is just going to absolutely obliterate you. So, like you said, I could see a world in where it makes its way up to B, or maybe even the bottom of A in certain metagames, but it just feels like the deck is just trying to be so fair. And when you're doing that into Draven, like these, sure, you're making tokens, so it doesn't feel as bad when they die, but the tokens are functionally units because you're spending your entire turn to build them. So your opponent using cards to get rid of them, like you're still using a card to make a token because you're playing this equipment, you're using your ability, so you do run out of cards pretty quickly. But I don't know, I just haven't been the biggest Azir believer. I do think he's pretty cool, but I just don't see his spot being particularly good in the metagame right now.
Yeah, I know we talked about potentially having him in the B tier when we were first building the list, but Collin actually was the one who started showing initially when we talked about it, it was due to him having such a high play rate in the China meta, but when we actually started looking at his conversion rate, it's actually very bad. So that may just be a result of him just being a very cheap deck to put together, kind of like Viktor was in set 1.
Yeah, so maybe it's like Alex said, there just haven't been the correct versions of it, or maybe he's bad in the best of 1. Who really knows? But maybe we'll see Azir pop off and I'll be proven wrong.
Next up, we've got Ezreal. Ezreal has been chatted about by quite a few content creators so far. Have seen people having mixed opinions on this legend. You know, drawing a single card for exhausting yourself is a pretty reasonable cost. But, you know, we have cards like Draven that are drawing multiple cards in a single turn cycle when Ezreal can only draw 1. I do think that blue and purple is a really strong color combo. We really liked it out of Teemo. We were excited to see what the next blue-purple legend would be, and when we saw that it was a guy that drew cards, like even if it wasn't drawing nearly as many cards as Draven, it was still worth exploring, and we have tested it a fair amount internally, and overall we decided to put Ezreal at the very bottom of C tier. There was even potential talk of just dropping him into Metal Card Side Quest, because we're not really sure what his finisher is. I mean, obviously he's got access to the Watcher, he's got access to the Mundo shenanigans, just like Teemo did. But yeah, he's just kind of in a weird spot in this format. What do you think, Alex?
I think Ezreal is carried by his color combination and his chosen champion. One of the best chosen champions in the game, absolutely incredible. And he holds, we talked about it a little bit earlier, I think, with Teemo, but he holds this this purple draw package that we've been seeing in a lot of these purple decks, the Turbo Draw Rasa engine, featuring Called Shot, Stack Deck, Rasa the Sunder. Sometimes we get the Shovel in there, the Final Rites. It's like kind of an engine we've seen it in Sivir, we see it in Teemo sometimes, we've been seeing it in Ezreal, and now there's like, I think one of the common comparisons I'm starting to see is who's doing it better. Is Sivir doing it better, or is Ezreal doing better? But my issue with this engine which is how I'm seeing most of the Ezreal decks played right now, is that it just doesn't really do anything. Like, it's great. You draw through your whole deck. You feel great. You're like, go draw, 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 draw. Wow, I have my whole deck in my hand. And then what do? I play 3 Rasas, and they attack you with a Darius, and you cry. And, like, it's nice because you have all the combat tricks that purple has to offer, but then, like, you're kind of just doing, I hate to say it, but something worse than what Draven is doing. Like, the problem with your legend is that it has to be built around. You have to, like, okay, singularity, that's no brainer. That's going to be in every Ezreal deck, right? But then, like, your signature spell doesn't even double, like, it doesn't actually turn your Ezreal off in one trip. Like, it doesn't work because it has to be opponent's things. It doesn't count your own. So now you have to play something else with your signature spell, which, in my opinion, was just bad design. Like, the signature spell should have just by itself triggered the champion. The signature spell has a very good effect, except it requires targets on both ends, which really holds it back. It's an incredible signature spell, just the targeting issue. Having your opponent have a guy on the battlefield and you having a guy on board just really holds it back from its true potential. I just think most of the time this Ezreal leader is actually just blank, and you have to fill your deck with cards that I would otherwise not have to trigger its ability. I think I would rather just have it for its chosen champion, truly. I think its chosen champion is incredible, and that's part of that draw your whole deck engine with the scrap heaps, the ponders, yada yada, called shots, etc., etc. But I think the problem is just this leader is kind of blank. I think you have to include your deck with so many air cards to ever try to get this leader, and then you're kind of just doing the thing where, like, oh, I play the thematic cards because they're thematic, but they're not actually the best. The deck is just best playing all the good cards in the deck and not caring about what the theme is trying to do. And I feel like that's a bit of a design fail, but we're not rating cards based on design fail. We're rating them based on playability, but even the playability is a bit of a fail. So I think C tier is pretty appropriate for Ezreal. I do hope to see him get better, but I just think right now there's not enough double targeting spells to warrant this effect, especially when, again, Draven does this multiple times a turn, every single turn.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Ezreal does get access to a few cards that are super powerful into the Dravens of the world, and Singularity. I think Singularity is one of the better cards into Draven because it can pop a couple of things, especially because he also has like Frigid Touch and Stupefy if they try to save something with like his axe, for example. You're one of the few decks that has some counterplay to tack onto your Singularity. But these cards are just so expensive, and like you said, you can draw your entire deck, but you're limited to 12 energy a turn, and even then you're never getting to 12 energy with Ezreal because all these cards are so power hungry. You don't have the Kaisa ability to limit all these spells that you're trying to cast. All these spells are going to cost you a power, and that can be really, really difficult to keep up with, especially because he isn't really a deck that can utilize seals super well. You want the blue seals for your singularities, you want your purple seals for all the broken purple cards in your chosen champ. It's just a very, very awkward deck that I don't really expect to see perform at the highest level, personally. But it is cool. He's got access to a lot of powerful cards, so maybe someone will find the correct combination of those to actually do something.
Next up, we've got the Kim Baroness, Renata Glask. I was really hyped about this legend at the start. I thought that it was going to be really cool to just make a bunch of gold and then have this pop-off turn where, you know, you're playing your Renata champion into a battlefield and throwing out a time warp and playing some other stuff and then going to the next turn and doing it all over again, and that all sounds really cool. But the biggest problem with Renata Glask is, again, this line of text that says, when you hold. And again, as we've mentioned so many times already in this tier list format, holding implies that you're going to combat a lot, and that means that Draven is drawing a lot of cards against you, and it's already kind of hard to hold in these colors anyway. Like, blue-yellow is not really packing a lot of beefy units that are capable of holding, so if you're trying to hold, then you're potentially like relying on hidden cards to do that. And you can do the hidden game a little bit. Renata does have access to some really strong hidden cards, but then you're paying power for that, and you know, you're not making gold in the early games unless you're holding already. So you don't have gold to just spend on these hiddens to start generating gold. So like, you're basically just getting a gold recycled or a power, you know, back half a power, because you'd rather probably have a full energy than, just have a gold token on the board. So it's just kind of in an awkward place, mostly because of the hold issue. Again, just like with Lux, you can play all the same kill spell shenanigans. You can be a really heavy control deck, but that doesn't help you hold. And that's one of the big issues, is if you're doing that out of Renata, you get an amazing signature spell and a pretty interesting and cool champion unit. You don't really get to take advantage of your legend ability pretty much at all until like a very, very late stage of the game. That's gonna drop her into Metal Card side quest. I don't know if you guys had anything to add to that.
As someone who's played a lot of Renata, I wish she could work. She seems like her second ability is very good. The hold one is the not a great one. The second ability is great. And if you could make a deck, you could design this deck to pretty much win every time if you can just score to 5. The problem is this deck just has such a miserable time accomplishing that goal. I think she has one of the best signature spells in the set. But again, like, I built this deck 2 ways. There's the version that can get to 5, get to score to 5 every time, but can't really utilize, isn't making gold along the way, and then can't utilize the score to 5 ability. And then I've got the versions that will win every time when they can get to 5, but is not able to easily score to 5 because it's wasted a lot of its deck space on trying to win the game once you get to 5. So I'd love to see someone crack this. Big fan of this deck. I love what she does. I love the idea of being like a time warp deck that isn't just like oops time warping, like it's actually working towards the time warp. But that being said, yeah, I think metal side quest is appropriate.
Yeah, it is still in that color combination that can kind of do the same thing that Lux can, where you're playing the 39 removal spells and just locking people out that way. So if you really want this metal card, that's probably the place that I would look for it personally. But and they can even do cool stuff like hostile takeover. Your opponent's Forerunner, and then you play Cold the Weak, you sack the Forerunner that you just stole. Now you get the tokens, and then they're also having to sack another unit, so you're getting rid of a Forerunner, which is normally a card that's a real big problem for that deck. But it's all just a little too cute and inconsistent compared to the other leaders of this color combination.
Next up, we've got the Battle Mistress, Sivir. There's been a lot of talk about Sivir in tier list. We had Tog putting her at S tier, and then we've seen other tier lists where she's at the bottom of the tier list. We just had Sivir win a Runes and Rift online event. And so where does Challenger TCG put Sivir? We dropped her into the lower part of C. We did have Collin testing some of that list at 1, and we've also tested Sivir pretty extensively with the purple package stuff. We were doing that pretty early on. We've tried other variations of her, more aggressive decks, things like that. Didn't really find anything super impressive. Collin, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit, go ahead.
Yeah, I can talk about Sivir for a while, honestly, it feels like. But she just has so many issues. She does kind of the same thing as these other decks where she's drawing her entire deck. You're using your Ezreals. You've got like a bunch of cool stuff like recurring with Fizz, and all of your power costs are functionally half, so she's actually able to build up energy over time, just kind of slowly. The issue is that it is pretty slowly that you're building up these energy costs, and while you're doing this, you just have these 2 to 3 might units that you have to try and somehow break into points with, and while you're breaking into even the 2 might units out of Draven, while they have access to the axes, the long swords, like just one of those, and you're so far behind. You aren't aggressive enough that these pushes that you have access to, like, well, you're going to score one of your 8 points that you need, great, and then they're just going to come back in. They're going to run over you. They're going to draw a card. Their pushes draw a card. Yours don't. So notably, from what I was told at least, I don't know if it's 100% true, but the Sivir list that did win played into literally 0 Dravens throughout the entire Runes and Rift event. So that's something that could particularly be working in her favor. But even then, we tested her into stuff like Rumble, and Rumble was just literally 0% to ever win that matchup, just because you don't have the might to be able to break into boards. So she's just, at least that tempo list is in like kind of this awkward spot where your units aren't big enough to really ever do anything. And even once you do, like, you're so reliant on punch first in order to get to actual might numbers, and they can just fight or flight you, they can rebuke you, they can switcheroo you. It just does not feel. It does not feel great. There are other variations of Sivir. I think she's one of the legends that's probably the most undercooked on our part, and like maybe there's some downwell combo that you can do with her because she produces that extra gold to help you get to the later power costs. You do downwell, you play some Rosses, you invert timelines to discard your opponent's hand. Like all of that stuff just gets disrupted by like a single counter spell or a single hard bargain out of your opponent. So like it all just feels kind of too magical Christmas land is what I would define Sivir as if I had to all of her various decks into one specific descriptor. It all sounds great, but it's all magical Christmas land and never really plays out in actuality once you're actually playing the game against an opponent who's also trying to win the game.
Next up, we've got Fiora. Fiora is a deck that we tested pretty extensively. I know Alex was trying to get her to work for quite a bit of time. She is in the Sett colors, so she suffers again from the whole Sett hero power is crazy. Fiora's is not that crazy. It's like okay. It helps generate more energy so that you can pay power costs or just ramp deeper into, playing later game bodies. But her signature spell is really strong. I think that's mostly all that Fiora's got going for her. I wasn't a big fan of this. I didn't test it a bunch either, so I'll let Alex talk about Fiora.
Yes, Fiora. Much like she longs for a worthy opponent, I long for an actual good Fiora deck, and unfortunately right now, this is not it. My biggest issue with Fiora is, one, she is just strictly inferior to Sett. Sett's legend ability is just strictly superior in this color combination. You don't get a whole lot, and one of my design issues with this set, Fiora falls into, if you look at Jax, you look at Fiora, you look at Ornn, these guys are all kind of doing a similar, like their legend ability does a similar thing. They're getting you free power to play your weapons. So in that regard, they're very similar. They're just all in different, doing the same thing in different color combinations. Fiora's biggest issue, however, is there is no payoff. And this was my complaint before. I don't want archetypes that are spoon-fed by any means. However, Fiora's feels almost incomplete. Like, there's not a real great payoff for her right now. Like, okay, you're like doing this thing where you're working extra hard to ramp, but there's not a whole lot of units that just get mighty by themselves, which feels kind of like, I don't know, just like bad. Honestly, the best one is Sett Brawler, and he's a Sett 1 card. So like, it feels like you have to work extra hard. I get the idea is you're supposed to equip weapons to make your guys mighty and then get the power back that you spent to equip them and then like ramp up. But like, none of these weapons really have a great payoff in her colors either. So it kind of makes me feeling like this like mechanic was kind of like half baked. The best thing you can probably do with her is Divine Judgment, which is cool. But again, like Divine Judgment is not the end all be all versus a lot of the top decks right now. I played a good amount with her. I think the Sig spell, of course, carries her. Having a counter spell in colors that you were never intended to have it is obviously very good, but it still, the rest of the mechanic feels very lackluster. I mean, this could be an Aurora deck, but why? Like, I don't know why you would want this to be an Aurora deck. Your guys are already mighty. They don't become mighty. You're not really ramping faster into them. So this archetype feels half-baked. It's just big dudes the deck, but Sett can kind of do the same thing, but also save the guys. So I think there's more to do with Fiora. Don't get me wrong. I think there could be something here. I feel like this could easily be in C tier, maybe even B tier, but right now I haven't cracked it and I haven't seen anybody else I have felt that has. So I think Metal Card Side Quest is perfectly appropriate for her.
And finally, we've got the Blade Dancer Irelia. We have decided to put Irelia into the A tier. We do think that she's doing something new and unique, and also a very powerful legend, a very powerful champion, a very powerful signature spell. Once you got the trifecta, you've always got to pay attention to that when you've got, good cards all around, 2 of which are starting in play. That's usually signs of a strong Riftbound deck. And we do believe that she's really good into the format right now, especially solid into Kaisa, solid into a lot of these other decks in the top tier. We've definitely had Collin playing probably the most of her, So I'll give it to Collin so he can explain why we've put why we've put Irelia into the A tier.
Yeah, she's a super fun deck. It feels like what Yasuo was supposed to be, but that's also why Yasuo is kind of relegated to the middle card side quest tier now, because you can just play Irelia if you want to be doing that, and you have a better leader, you have a better chosen champ, and you have a better sig spell. So Yasuo is the prime person when it comes to just there's a better version of you now. So sorry to say. But she's a lot of fun. She gets to do really cool stuff. She's the antithesis of the protect the king strategy and just have your one Irelia, you strap her up with some boots. She's ganking from one battlefield to the next, and you just have all the buff spells, all the interaction to keep her around so your opponent can never actually hold for game, even if they get to 7, if they're only capturing one battlefield. And then your other one is Irelia with a couple of Defiant Dances, some Thwonks. It's just like, you got the not so fast in case they try to rebuke her. You can really completely lock your opponent out of the game with her. So it's a super strong strategy. It's kind of held back a little bit right now with inconsistency. It is kind of a reactive deck, kind of a hold deck, as you mentioned, but the difference is that it's holding with a deflect unit that is backed up by like GAs and such, Zanya's Hourglass. So you aren't going to be able to kill it that easily, and it'll just be a very sticky threat. You know, even if they kill it with one of these things, you've got Ride the Winds, you can just put her back in there. Her main issue lies in that you need her interaction to line up with what your opponent is doing. As I mentioned, if they have rebukes, you specifically need not so fast. If they have fight or flights, then you probably need defies. If your opponent's trying to win the game, like with Kaisa with time warps, you need the hard bargain, you need the wind wall, and if they're trying to push in with the Darius, you need the Thwonks. Like, you just need so many of these interaction spells to line up with what it is that your opponent's doing. So finding that perfect list is going to be something that even I won't be able to do until we know what the expected metagame is for Bologna and Vegas. So it's something that I will continue to cook for. I'm a big Irelia believer. I hope that she can be the deck that I truly enjoy in this metagame. But for me, it's between her and Draven right now. So we'll see going into this format what I end up sticking with.
And that is going to conclude our tier list video. If you guys have any comments or suggestions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. Funny little observation real quick before we go that I just kind of noticed is not so surprising, but all of the purple legends are dodge the metal card side quest with the exception of Yasuo. And honestly, Yasuo probably even might be C tier this set. Purple just got such a big buff, and it's actually crazy to see that like there's basically no purple legends in the metal card side quest.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget about Jinx.
Yeah. Okay, well, Jinx is terrible, but
There's no saving her.
No saving Jinx. But yeah, if you guys like what we're doing, please leave a like on the video. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like this. Check out our Metafy if you haven't. We've got a new guide up. We've got new content coming out all the time. We're also streaming in our Discord even more than before. So if you want to check that stuff out, link in the bio. We will catch you guys next time. Challenger TCG is now powered by TopDeck.gg. TopDeck.gg is the tournament software you want to be using when hosting any tournament. It has instant pairings, a robust mobile app, integrated payments, and an easy-to-use interface, all for just $12 a month. You can get a free 14-day trial right now if you want to try out the software and use promo code CHALLENGER for an additional month free of charge. If you decide you want to keep the software, use promo code CHALLENGER25 for a 25% discount off your yearly subscription plan. Challenger TCG now has a Metafy. Wow. If you would like to support our content so we can continue doing what we are doing, then please consider subscribing to any of our Metafy tiers. Not only will you be supporting more content like this, but you will also gain access to our community Discord where we do live streams, Riftbound product giveaways, host VODs of our competitive testing sessions, and offer one-on-one coaching sessions. The members of our team are seasoned veterans of the competitive TCG world and have seen multiple successes across a variety of games. We also have written deck guide content available for free right now, and will be providing additional guides at no cost in the future. So check us out, even if you can't subscribe if you are looking for high quality competitive content.